Well, thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. Metro Vancouver is a wholesaler of drinking water to a region of about 2.5 million people. And water originates from three primary watersheds. As you can see on this diagram, we have the Capilano, Seymour, and Coquitlam watersheds. These watersheds are about 60,000 hectares in overall size, and they capture the rainwater and the snowmelt that we receive within the region. The series of lines and dots represent our infrastructure. So as a wholesaler, Metro Vancouver delivers water to our members within the Greater Vancouver Water District. You'll see the yellow triangles, which show the location of the primary treatment plants. Water then passes through a network of transmission pipes shown in blue, and then you'll see a series of dots in various colors that represent disinfection facilities within the system. We have pumping stations and reservoirs that move the water around. One thing to note is strategically, Metro Vancouver's system is a very robust system with lots of redundancy built into it to ensure a sustainable supply of water under many different types of conditions. We have various crossings within the area from a seismic perspective, and those are all carefully monitored as well, because the water has to pass underneath the various types of water bodies to get out to the end users. Now, with respect to our protected watersheds, we are blessed with a water supply that's very unique to this region. There's not too many places within the world that have the kind of protected watersheds that Metro Vancouver has. The Water District was established back in 1924, and since that date, our first commissioner started the initiative to maintain these protected watersheds. There's no activity. They're kept as natural as possible, other than for maintenance purposes related to security and fire management and those kind of issues. So what you see in the figure above here are two of our watersheds. On the right is the Capilano watershed, and on the left you see Seymour Falls Dam and the Seymour watershed. There are some issues from a water quality perspective, which is why we've invested a significant amount of money over the last numbers of decades on water treatment infrastructure. So the lakes are pristine, as I mentioned. However, there's natural occurring issues that we have from a quality perspective. So what are those natural occurring concerns? Well, turbidity happens to be one of them. When we have heavy rainfall, which we do quite often within this region, a lot of those steep mountain slopes end up delivering sediment into the water, which takes a long time for it to eventually settle out, and it, in fact, will never settle out completely. That's where we need treatment. There also are endemic microbiological concerns. So if you look at again, the watersheds are open for various types of animals to migrate in and out. Bears, deers, beavers, they all transmit certain types of parasites. Giardia and Cryptosporidium happen to be a couple of them that are regulated within the Canadian standards. So we need to ensure adequate disinfection for those particular organisms. The water is snow melt and rainfall. It's very low in pH, and so it tends to be on the acidic side of the pH scale. That has a tendency to corrode our pipes, and we need to manage that aspect of it as well. Plus, we have a very large transmission and distribution system. By the time we get the water from our transmission pipes into the municipality system, we've covered almost 9,000 to 8,000 kilometers of piping. There's potential for bacteria to regrow within the system, even though it's been treated at the source. And again, the treatment system helps to deal with all of those concerns. So we are fortunate to have these protected watersheds, and we will be maintaining our supplies in such a condition moving into the future. What you see here are the facilities themselves. So the very large plant on the left is the Capilano, Seymour Capilano filtration plant. It treats about 1.8 billion liters of water per day. That's equivalent to about the capacity of BC Place Stadium. It can fill the entire stadium up within a day. What you see is an elaborate process of treatment. I won't get into all the specifics. On the right-hand side is a photo of the Coquitlam ultraviolet disinfection facility. So we use a number of different types of technologies to treat our drinking water, again, to ensure that we have one of the cleanest and safest water supplies available. The combination of treatment includes filtration, which is the primary means of removing particulate. We also have ozone that's utilized in our system. There's ultraviolet disinfection that I've just mentioned, and the photograph shows some of those treatment units. We modify the pH and the alkalinity of the water to address the concerns associated with the low pH that I mentioned earlier, which is corrosive to our pipes. And then we do add a nominal amount of chlorination within the system to ensure that we have microbes within the transmission and distribution piping well controlled as well. The facilities were also built in a very sustainable way. Well before sustainability ever became a buzzword, I think at Metro, we're very proud of the fact that we've looked into sustainable features in all of these plants. These particular facilities were developed over at least a decade or so in terms of the planning, design, and construction phase. And both facilities have LEED certification to the gold standard, and a lot of other sustainable features were carefully thought and built into the facilities. What you see here are billions of liters per day of water use. The red line dictates peak flow, and the blue line on the bottom is the average day flow. On top in green is the population. So starting in around 1985, you can see the population was about 1.28 million for the region. It's been gradually going up by about 35,000 persons per year moving into the region, and we now sit at just under 2.5 million people. The average day use within the region, which is the blue line on the bottom, has been relatively steady, as you can see, as well as the average of the peak day use. Now that has been a result of maintaining vigilance with respect to water use within the region. If we did not have adequate controls with respect to some of the restrictions that I'll start to mention shortly, and also the cooperation of the population at large with respect to the conservation ethic, we would not be able to maintain that flat demand. It's a per capita demand use reduction is what's giving us that benefit. Our use per person on average is going down, and historically it has been even since 1985. And more recently, we've been reducing our demands by close to 2% per annum over the past 5 years or so. And we would like to continue that as long as practical before we need to get into either future supplies, which I'll talk about, or enhanced restrictions to modify summer use. Summer use is the key issue here. If you look at the red line, it's significantly higher than the blue one. That is a direct consequence of how much the use jumps up in the summertime, almost doubling under peak conditions from the average use over the year. So who uses the water? All that water consumption, where does it go? The bulk of water that's used within the region goes to residential use. Residential use on the outdoors applications, such as lawn watering, is the single most specific place where water is utilized. Also, indoor water use is quite significant. The majority of it within the home itself is utilized by the toilets, our showers and taps, followed by clothes washing. So those are strategic places that we can look towards within the home. There's also industrial use, so the institutional, industrial, commercial sector, as well as a small amount of agriculture, ends up utilizing the next largest component outside of residential use. And finally, we have other miscellaneous uses as well, which end up completing our overall consumption. Firefighting comes out of our water mains. Water that's utilized for flushing and cleaning of our pipes comes out of the water mains. There is a small amount of leakage that obviously is vigilantly looked after that's also there. So that's the overall contribution of use. And again, I'm emphasizing that the utilization of water for irrigation on a residential basis is the primary place for consumption within the region. So what are we? Are we the picture on the left, or are we the picture on the right? Well, the answer is we are both. Metro Vancouver is, in this case, it's called the rain coast on the slide, but it's a rainforest. We are temperate rainforest, and we do get lots of precipitation within the region. The watershed areas receive the most. You could have up to 5 meters of water within a year within our watershed lands. and even significant amounts of water towards the southern part of the region. For those that are living in the sunny parts of Surrey or Tsawwassen, you'll end up with about 1 meter of rainfall on average within a year, which is still quite significant. However, that is not persistent throughout the entire yearly cycle. We have lots of rainfall, usually in the fall and the winter time. Today is a bit of a difference from last year. We didn't have any rain almost from the 15th of May literally to the end of August. However, this year is a slightly different season. So we can see that there's differences from a year-to-year basis as well in terms of how water is available or not available within the region. In the summer, however, we do have the potential for extended periods of drought, and you can see what ends up happening is that we have a very large spike and peak within the water use within the region, and that needs to be carefully managed. So talking about carefully managing the water supply, water shortage response was one of the tools that we ended up using last year. We have what's called the Water Shortage Response Plan. It is a 4-stage plan that looks after utilizing methods to minimize the amount of water that we end up consuming so that we are able to make sure that the water is available for the most important uses within the region. What you see on the left is a picture of the drawdown within Coquitlam Lake that took place in 2015. And sprinkling is the key when it comes to water shortage management. We have a stage plan again, so stage 1 is a very reasonable approach to restricting lawn sprinkling to 3 days a week within the morning hours. And if we need to instill greater reductions in demand, then we have a staged approach, 2 and 3. We went up to that in 2015. The only other time Metro Vancouver's water shortage response plan was enacted to those levels was back in 2003. So it's a very infrequent occasion when that is required. This slide shows you a graphic related to how we managed the 2015 drought. It again shows billions of liters of water use on the vertical axis, and just focus on the period in June, which is our normal restrictions. We were using about 1.5 billion liters of water on average during that period. It peaked around July the 2nd, going up to about 1.7. So we do end up consuming a lot more water under very dry and hot conditions. Stage 2 was implemented, reducing the demand back down to 1.4. The summer drought extended, the heat did not let off, the rain did not come. There's a few rainfall events that you can see on the chart, but they did not even wet the ground, so were not substantial with respect to adding volume to our lake reservoirs. And finally, stage 3 was implemented to ensure that we had adequate supply if indeed the summer extended into the fall and we had an extended fall drought, which has occurred in the past as well. And with the regional cooperation, both from the municipalities and from the district, we were able to get down to below 1.2 billion liters towards the end of the summertime. Where do we go from here? Yes, we will continue to promote water conservation as a means of managing demands within the region. We will, as Rolina will talk about shortly, there's campaigns in place now to encourage the awareness around water conservation, but that population chart is real. We will continue to have population growth, another 1 million people within the region in the next 25 years. We need to accommodate with respect to water use. So where is the water going to come from? We'd like to stick with our existing high quality sources of supply. So what you see here is the Coquitlam watershed. It's largely allocated to BC Hydro for the purposes of power production. And our intention is to modify or basically develop new licenses through the province and working with BC Hydro to access that supply primarily for drinking water sources. It will require new infrastructure. There's about a $650 to $700 million initiative that's currently underway to install an additional intake, new transmission tunnel, as well as treatment facilities to accommodate the additional supply that we need. So that will sustain us well into the latter part of this particular decade. And I can assure you that we will all within this room have plenty of water available both for ourselves as well as our kids moving into the future. And then we've got other initiatives in place for the very long term, well beyond the century as to where supplies will potentially come from.
In this region, we have this myth of abundance. It's raining, we can see the water, we can see the mountains, we know there's lakes, there's quite a disconnect on why we need to conserve. One of the things that we really wanted to help people understand from a high level is that it's really a story about being mindful about how you use your water, or being water wise, and that it's an infrastructure story, much like Inder just told. It's not just saving water, it's using treated drinking water for where it's needed most: drinking, cooking, cleaning. So on the left here you see a couple of big signs, and we developed these. They actually go on what we call our water and sewer shacks. So they go out with our construction crews. So when they're in there putting in their water mains, they're in there putting their sewer mains, people then can say, oh, this construction is about building in the system that gets our water to us. So that was our big first thing, was raising the profile for the conversation of water generally. The second big thing that our team wanted to do was target and develop programs for the people who are using the most water. We knew that from a residential perspective, houses on the west side and the south side are the ones who water the most. And that's where we get the most watering infractions. And then we were looking at what kind of systems are using the most water, and started developing programs to target those specific areas. So one of the programs that his name's Chris Radsmaninski, and he's working with our ICI sector and big acreage. We have in the west side of Vancouver a number of houses and properties that are very large, acre and a half. And some of these houses use extraordinarily more water than the average household. So what you see here, the red line is what that home uses, the blue line is what the average home uses. We had one house that was using enough water that the amount that they paid to the city each year for their water was $16,000. So that's how much more water they were using than the average household. So Chris sent out a batch of letters, I think it was 20 letters, and in the letter it basically just says, hey, did you know that this was happening on your property? And of those letters that he sent out, he received, I believe it was 8 calls back. People being like, I'm what? No, I didn't know. And so they started, our team is basically working with them directly to say, okay, well, here's what it might be. It might be that you have a once-through system in your landscaping that you didn't know about. So water fountain, a creek, something that you don't know is once through. Or maybe you have a leak somewhere on your property that you don't know about, it's underground. That's one way we're targeting some of those houses. This is, again, a pilot this year. There's a provision in the water shortage response plan where golf courses can take an allowance, a water allowance or water budget. So what we're working on this year for a pilot project is we've got all of the city golf courses, all of the private golf courses signed on to, rather than following our quite rigorous, here's when you can water, they get each year a budget. So we say, you can water 10 gallons this year. If you want to water 10 gallons your first day, Bob's your uncle. If you want to water a little bit every day on just this part, that's fine. And if they want to go below that and water less, they can. And then if they go above their water allowance, there are penalties for it. So let's see how that goes this year. But it's really exciting because they're all on board, and after last year, the people are much more cognizant of, hey, let's do something. The other big thing is looking at single pass systems. So a single pass system is something where the water comes into the system, is basically transfers through it, and then is flushed down the drain. So this is treated drinking water. Sometimes it's a fountain. Oftentimes, what we're finding is that they're once through cooling systems for large buildings. The reality is that this water can be recirculated for use. It's just that they haven't been built that way because we had a lot of water to use. So they did a big report earlier this year and found that the amount of water used for once through cooling is 3.5% of our water demand. The Capital Regional District was already sort of looking at this, but this report sealed the deal for them, and they actually passed a bylaw earlier this year saying that by January 1st, these systems are banned. No grandfathering, you've got to fix them, you've got to replace them. So we are going to do something similar this fall, and that will be It's, again, a really targeted way of doing that. The other one that Chris is working on is working directly with the BC Dental Association and equipment suppliers. So they use a once-through system for their, mouthwash things. So they're going to start looking at how they upgrade their equipment so that it's reusing water more smartly. We're also doing a number of additions to our building bylaws. So we, in Vancouver, are unique. We get to make our own bylaws for buildings, and we're adding in some more of some of these things actually into the bylaws so that they are built into policy. We're obviously asking for buy-in, but it will also be required. So on the communications side, we're relying somewhat on Metro Vancouver's big communications campaign, and then building on that, targeting into specific areas. So this year we're developing a program with the Irrigation Association and other irrigation businesses to figure out how we can do some training with them, give them the communication materials that they need to work with their clients to get the results that we want. Right now, a big bylaw infraction that we see is that the irrigation systems are running and the homeowner doesn't know how to change them when we go to another stage, or they don't even know that it's coming on in the middle of the night, and so they're getting tickets and then they don't know how to change it. So getting out in front with the irrigation companies so that they can plan that in advance. The other one, we're working with our garden organizations. So we're working on a program with our master gardeners at Van Dusen and the BC Botanical Garden to help people understand how their landscaping can impact the amount of water that they use. On the enforcement side, we've done a few tweaks on our communications so that on the one part, we're letting people know what really is an infraction, and on the other part, we're using that information to rejig where our bylaw enforcement officers are so that they can actually deliver a ticket. In order to deliver a bylaw infraction ticket, you have to see it happening. So if Lorena's walking around and she sees that Shelley's watering her lawn at 4 in the afternoon, she can't do anything about it. She can call in and we can say, well, we'll send Shelley a letter. But if I, as a bylaw infraction officer, see Shelley watering, I can give her a ticket. So we reorganize when the bylaw enforcement officers will go out and where they'll go out based on the kind of data we get in from calls and reports to 311 and through our Van Connect app. So these images that you see are all from our Van Connect app. So you can actually, first, check what the actual water restrictions are. Second, find out if today is actually a problem. So if I'm standing outside a business and it seems like they might be doing something wrong, I can plug in what day it is. Are they odd or even? Are they residential or industrial? And it will tell me, can I water? No, I can't water. Or yes, go ahead. So say you go through, they find out that no, they can't water today, they're still watering. They can actually go through and then report that to the city. It goes through our 311 system. The team gets a notification of where it is, and at the end of the week, we get a heat map of where all those calls are. And what we found last year, and that we're certainly seeing again this year, as I mentioned earlier, those are primarily in our larger residential areas. So south of Vancouver, west of Vancouver. So what you see up here are a couple of outreach and tools that we've developed. When we went out earlier this year, some people were giving us the feedback, I don't know how to talk to my neighbor. So we developed a bilingual water restriction tool, English and traditional Chinese, something that people can share around with their neighbors if they want to, as a friendly, like, I don't want you to get in trouble. Here's the information that you might need. Maybe you don't know that it's there. The other thing that we found last year was even the people who were fine with not watering, who said, I would be fine with, we actually had one guy, he's a big sustainability guy, well-known, said, I would be fine with having my lawn go gold, but I used to be a landscaper, and there's part of me that feels guilty about that. And he leads this big sustainability initiative in his neighborhood. So we talked about that quite a bit and said, why don't we develop something that for the people who are choosing to let their lawn go brown is a signal to their neighbors that says, hey, I'm not a negligent lawn owner. I am choosing not to water my lawn. So on the bottom here you see this is our gold lawn kit. So it's got a little flower-shaped sign. It's quite small. It's about this big. something they can put in the front of their lawn. It says, I'm going for gold. I'm choosing to save my treated drinking water for cooking, cleaning, and drinking. And then the kit also includes a beautiful swatch thing from Van Dusen Gardens, which shares a bunch of water-wise plants and water-wise tips for your lawn and garden. And then the final thing that we're doing, it's just about building the literacy around what is water-wise use. We call it the Water-Wise Challenge. It'll be a game either to play online or on your phone. And it goes through 9 questions. It's about building the literacy around your outdoor water use generally. So what you see here, the first one is the how high should you cut your grass in the first place, gives you some information, and then the bottom is a pro tip. Consider just letting it go dormant for the summer. Don't worry, it will grow back. The one in the middle, which item can be used to save water? The answer is all of them. Use a spring-loaded spray valve, use mulch to cover your soil. And then the third one is leaks, that you lose 10% of your water from leaks. And the final one, because last year we got a lot of jokes around the drought, people saying, oh, that soon they're going to say that I can't even drink any water because we're in a drought. And we were like, no, drink as much water as you want. Just stop pouring it on your lawn. So the final answer, I wish it had the image here, the final to-do item is make lemonade. And it basically says, you know, drink as much water as you want. We have amazing, amazing drinking water, and that's what the treated drinking water from your tap is really for.